Have you ever stumbled upon something you weren't supposed to find? Maybe it was an old box in the attic, a door you thought was locked, or a strange tape hidden away for years. What if that discovery wasn't just unexpected, but something truly terrifying? Tonight, we're diving into 3 unsettling stories where curiosity led to chilling discoveries. Each story is darker than the last, and the final tale? It's the kind that will make you question every closed door, every hidden space, and every whisper in the dark. So grab your blanket, turn off the lights, and whatever you do, don't look behind you, because some things, once found, can never be forgotten. It was supposed to be a fresh start. After a messy divorce, Sarah had moved into a charming old house in a quiet neighborhood. The house was a fixer-upper, but she didn't mind. She loved the idea of making it her own, of turning it into a home. The real estate agent had warned her that the house had a history, but Sarah didn't believe in ghosts. She was more concerned with the peeling wallpaper and the creaky floorboards. The first few weeks were uneventful. Sarah spent her days painting walls and unpacking boxes, slowly transforming the house into something livable. But there was one part of the house she hadn't touched yet: the attic. The door was locked, and she hadn't been able to find the key. She had meant to ask the previous owners about it, but they had moved out of state, and she didn't have their contact information. One rainy afternoon, Sarah decided to tackle the attic. She had found a set of old keys in a drawer, and one of them looked like it might fit the lock. She climbed the narrow staircase to the attic door, her heart pounding with a mix of excitement and apprehension. The key slid into the lock with a satisfying click, and the door creaked open. The attic was dark and dusty, filled with old furniture, boxes, and cobwebs. Sarah stepped inside, her flashlight cutting through the gloom. The air was thick with the smell of mildew and decay, and the floorboards groaned under her weight. She began to sift through the boxes, curious to see what had been left behind. Most of the boxes were filled with junk: old clothes, broken toys, and yellowed newspapers. But one box caught her attention. It was smaller than the others, and it was sealed with duct tape. Sarah used a pair of scissors to cut through the tape, her hands trembling with anticipation. Inside the box was a collection of photographs. They were old, the edges curled and faded, but the images were clear. They were all of the same woman, a young, dark-haired woman with piercing eyes. In some of the photos, she was smiling, but in others, she looked terrified, her eyes wide with fear. Sarah flipped through the photos, her unease growing with each one. At the bottom of the box was a small, leather-bound journal. Sarah opened it, her heart pounding. The pages were filled with cramped, handwritten notes. The first entry was dated over 50 years ago. "I can't take it anymore," it read. "He's always watching me, always listening. I don't know how much longer I can keep this up." Sarah's hands trembled as she flipped through the journal. The entries grew more frantic, more desperate. The woman wrote about being trapped, about hearing voices in the walls, about seeing shadows where there shouldn't be any. The last entry was dated just a few days before the woman's death. "He's coming for me," it read. "I can hear him in the walls. I don't have much time. If anyone finds this, please help me. Don't let him win." Sarah's blood ran cold. She didn't know who the woman was or what had happened to her, but she couldn't shake the feeling that she wasn't alone in the attic. She glanced around, her flashlight casting long shadows on the walls. The air grew colder, and she could hear a faint whispering sound, like someone was speaking just out of earshot. She grabbed the journal and the photos and rushed out of the attic, slamming the door behind her. She didn't stop until she was back in the safety of her living room, her heart pounding in her chest. She tried to convince herself that it was just her imagination, that the journal was just an old relic from a troubled past, but deep down, she knew something was wrong. That night, Sarah woke up to the sound of footsteps in the hallway. She sat up, her heart racing. The footsteps grew louder, closer, until they stopped outside her bedroom door. She held her breath, her eyes fixed on the door. The handle began to turn, slowly, deliberately. Sarah screamed, grabbing the nearest thing she could find, a lamp, and hurling it at the door. The footsteps retreated, and the house fell silent. She didn't sleep the rest of the night. The next morning, Sarah called a locksmith to change all the locks in the house. She thought about calling the police, but what would she say? That she had found an old journal and heard footsteps in the night? They would think she was crazy. But the strange occurrences didn't stop. She would hear whispers in the walls, see shadows moving out of the corner of her eye. The attic door, which she had locked and bolted, would sometimes be found wide open, the key still in her possession. Sarah tried to sell the house, but no one was interested. The real estate agent told her that the house had a reputation and that it had been on the market for years before she bought it. Sarah realized then that she was trapped, just like the woman in the journal. To this day, Sarah still lives in the house, though she never goes near the attic. And sometimes, when she's alone, she hears the whispers again, low and insistent, as if something is trying to tell her something. When Mark moved into his new apartment, he didn't think much of the old VCR and stack of tapes left behind in the basement storage unit. The landlord had told him the previous tenant had disappeared without a trace, leaving most of their belongings behind. Mark, being a film enthusiast, saw it as a treasure trove of forgotten media. He decided to take the VCR and tapes upstairs, curious to see what was on them. The first few tapes were unremarkable. Old home movies of birthday parties, family gatherings, and vacations. But the fourth tape was different. The label simply read, "Watch Me." Mark popped it into the VCR, not knowing what to expect. The video started with static, then cut to a dimly lit room. A man sat in a chair, his face obscured by shadows. He was speaking, but the audio was garbled, as if the tape had been damaged. Mark leaned closer, trying to make out the words. Suddenly, the man's head snapped up, and he stared directly into the camera. His eyes were wide, filled with terror. "If you're watching this," the man said, his voice trembling, "it means I'm already dead. He's coming for me. He's coming for all of us." The screen went black, then cut to another scene. This time, the camera was handheld, shaky, as if someone was running. The footage was grainy, but Mark could make out a dark hallway, the walls lined with doors. The person holding the camera was breathing heavily, their panicked gasps echoing through the speakers. "He's here," a voice whispered. "He's in the house." The camera swung around, capturing a glimpse of a figure standing at the end of the hallway. It was tall and thin, its face obscured by darkness. The figure began to move, its movements jerky and unnatural. The person holding the camera screamed, and the footage cut to static. Mark's heart was racing. He told himself it was just a poorly made horror movie. But something about the tape felt real. He ejected it and grabbed the next one. The label read, "Don't watch this." Against his better judgment, he put it in. The tape started with a close-up of a woman's face. She was crying, her makeup smeared, her eyes red and swollen. "Please," she begged, "if you're watching this, don't come looking for me. He'll find you too." The screen cut to a shot of the same dark hallway from the previous tape. The woman was running now, the camera bouncing with each step. She turned a corner and stopped, her breath catching in her throat. The figure was there, standing at the end of the hallway. It stepped closer, its movements slow and deliberate. "No," the woman whispered. "Please, no." The figure reached out, its hand filling the screen. The footage cut to static, and the tape ended. Mark's hands were trembling. He didn't want to watch any more, but he couldn't stop himself. He grabbed the next tape, labeled "The End." The tape started with a shot of the basement. The camera panned across the room, revealing a chair, a table, and a series of tools laid out neatly. The man from the first tape was sitting in the chair, his hands bound, his face pale with fear. "This is it," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "He's going to kill me. But if you're watching this, you need to know the truth. He's not human. He's something else. And he's coming for you too." The screen went black and the tape ended. Mark sat in stunned silence, his mind racing. He didn't know what to think. Was this some kind of elaborate prank? Or was it real? He decided to investigate. He grabbed a flashlight and headed down to the basement, determined to find out the truth. The basement was exactly as it had been in the tape. The chair, the table, the tools. Mark's heart pounded as he stepped closer, his flashlight casting long shadows on the walls. That's when he saw it. A door, hidden behind a stack of boxes. It was small, barely big enough for a person to crawl through. Mark hesitated, his instincts screaming at him to turn back. But he couldn't. He had to know. He pushed the boxes aside and opened the door, revealing a narrow tunnel. The air was cold and damp, and the walls were lined with strange symbols. Mark crawled inside, his flashlight flickering as he moved deeper into the darkness. The tunnel opened up into a small room. The walls were covered in photographs, dozens of them, all of people. Some were smiling, others terrified. And in the center of the room was a chair, just like the one in the tape. Mark's blood ran cold. He turned to leave, but the door slammed shut behind him. The flashlight flickered and went out, plunging the room into darkness. He could hear footsteps, slow and deliberate, coming closer. "No," Mark whispered, his voice trembling. "Please, no." The footsteps stopped, and he felt a cold hand on his shoulder. He turned, his heart pounding, but there was nothing there. The room was empty. Mark didn't know how he got out of the basement. He didn't remember running, or climbing the stairs, or locking the door behind him. All he knew was that he was safe, for now. But sometimes, when he's alone, he hears the footsteps again, slow and deliberate, coming closer. And sometimes he sees the figure standing in the shadows, watching him. Lena had always been a curious soul. As a child, she loved exploring old buildings, peeking into forgotten corners, and imagining the lives that had once filled them. Even as an adult, she couldn't resist the allure of an old, abandoned place. So when she inherited her late aunt's sprawling Victorian house, she was more excited than daunted by the task of cleaning it up. The house sat on the edge of a small town, shrouded by trees and mist that seemed to linger even on sunny days. It had been empty for years, ever since her aunt had passed away under mysterious circumstances. The locals whispered about the house, claiming it was haunted, but Lena didn't believe in such things. She had grown up in the city, where ghosts were nothing more than stories told to scare children. The first few days in the house were uneventful. She swept away cobwebs, dusted off furniture, and hauled boxes of old clothes and trinkets to the curb. There was an odd stillness to the place, but she attributed it to years of neglect. The creaks and groans of the house settling were nothing more than the sounds of old wood and drafts. One afternoon, while clearing out the attic, Lena found a door she hadn't noticed before. It was small, set into the wall at an awkward angle, as if someone had built the room around it. The door was painted a deep, unsettling red, the kind of red that reminded her of blood. There was no handle, only a keyhole, but she hadn't seen any keys that fit it. Her curiosity piqued. Lena searched through her aunt's belongings, hoping to find the key. She rifled through drawers, checked under old rugs, and emptied boxes of knick-knacks. Finally, in an ornate jewelry box tucked at the back of a closet, she found it, a small iron key with a red ribbon tied to it. Her hands trembled as she climbed back into the attic. She slid the key into the lock, and it turned with a soft click. The door opened slowly, revealing a narrow staircase that led down into darkness. The air that wafted up was damp and cold, carrying with it the scent of rot and mildew. Lena hesitated. She knew this was the moment to close the door, lock it, and never think of it again. But something compelled her to move forward, as if an invisible thread were pulling her down the stairs. The steps were steep, and the wood groaned under her weight. She held a flashlight in front of her, its beam weak against the oppressive dark. The stairs spiraled down, much deeper than the house's foundation should have allowed. She felt as if she were descending into the earth itself. At the bottom, the stairs opened into a stone chamber. The walls were rough and damp, carved directly into the rock. Candles lined the walls, their flames casting long, twisting shadows. They shouldn't have been burning. There was no sign of life, no smell of smoke. But they flickered as if recently lit. In the center of the room stood an old wooden chair. Shackles hung from its arms and legs, and the wood was stained a dark, rusty brown. Lena's pulse quickened. The room was filled with old tools, rusted blades, hooks, and instruments whose purpose she couldn't guess. She took a step back, her foot crunching on something brittle. She looked down to see bones, small and pale, scattered across the floor. Her breathing turned shallow. She wanted to run, but her legs felt heavy, her feet glued to the cold stone. She wasn't alone. She could feel it. A presence watching her from the shadows. She turned slowly, the flashlight beam trembling in her grip. At the edge of the light stood a figure. It was tall and thin, its limbs elongated and twisted. Its skin was pale and stretched tight over sharp bones, and its eyes, sunken and black, reflected the candlelight. The figure took a step forward, its movements slow and deliberate. "Why did you open the door?" The voice was soft, almost a whisper, but it filled the room, pressing against her like a physical weight. Lena couldn't respond. Her mouth opened and closed, but no sound escaped. She stumbled backward, her back hitting the cold stone wall. The figure moved closer, its head tilting at an unnatural angle. "You shouldn't have come here," it said, its voice now a guttural growl. "Now, you'll never leave." She bolted, her feet slipping on the damp stone as she scrambled up the stairs. The shadows twisted around her, and the walls seemed to close in, the staircase stretching endlessly before her. She ran until her legs burned, until her lungs ached, until her flashlight died, plunging her into darkness. When she finally burst through the red door, she slammed it shut behind her. She collapsed to the floor, her chest heaving. The house was silent. The sun had set, and the moon cast a pale glow through the attic window. She didn't remember leaving the house. She didn't remember driving. All she knew was that when she came to her senses, she was sitting in her car at the edge of town, her hands stained red, the key still clutched in her fist. She never went back to the house. She sold it to a developer who planned to tear it down and build condos. She moved to a new city, changed her phone number, and tried to forget. But the nightmares never stopped. She would wake in the middle of the night to the sound of whispers, to the feeling of cold, damp air against her skin. Months later, while scrolling through the news, a headline caught her eye. "Construction crew disappears at old Victorian house site." The article mentioned the red door, now hanging open, with a staircase leading down into the earth. No bodies were found, but the workers' equipment remained, abandoned at the top of the stairs. Lena dropped her phone, her hands trembling. She could hear it again. The voice from the basement, soft and insistent. "Why did you open the door?" She knew then that it wasn't over, that it would never be over. And as the shadows in her room began to shift as the whispers filled the air around her, she realized that no matter how far she ran, the door would always find her. And there you have it. 3 creepy stories from people who found something they weren't supposed to. From the haunting secrets of the locked attic and the unsettling discovery in the basement tapes, to the bone-chilling mystery behind the red door, these tales remind us that curiosity isn't always a good thing. Sometimes what's hidden is meant to stay hidden. If these stories sent chills down your spine, don't forget to hit that like button and let me know in the comments which story haunted you the most. Was it the attic's whispers, the eerie videotapes, or the terrifying figure behind the red door? Make sure to share this video with your friends who love a good scare and hit that subscribe button along with the bell icon so you never miss a spine-tingling story from the sixth frequency. Thanks for watching, and remember, if you ever find a locked door, a hidden box, or a darkened room, think twice before opening it. Stay curious, stay scared, and I'll see you in the next video.